Heath here again for MiltonRose Learning with another Let's Learn video on the Battle of Verdun in 1916. This is for our World War I series, so an absolutely pivotal battle in the First World War today. So we're going to look at some of the context and the causes that were driving leading up to this this pivotal battle. Then we'll give you a really good chronology, and we'll kind of really go into that and give you some of the best notes for your kind of for your books, and then a key turning point in the Battle of Verdun when it kind of ended, and then we'll look at the impact and significance of the events described today and kind of how that led into the later war as well. Okay, so the Battle of Verdun. Let's dive in, everyone. Okay, so the context and the causes, what was driving the Battle of Verdun before it kind of all kicked off. So the first one was Erich von Falkenhayn's attrition strategy. Erich von Falkenhayn was the chief of staff of the German army, so he's basically the one in charge of the strategy, and he basically wanted to abandon territorial conquest. He's thinking, let's not try and take land because it's too difficult, but instead we will focus now on purely destroying French manpower. Okay, and in the Battle of Verdun, he was looking for a 2-to-1 casualty ratio. So for every German soldier killed, they kill 2 French soldiers. Okay, so that 2-to-1 ratio to try and grind them down. Okay, and as you can see, though, the French were preparing in Verdun. Okay, this was not going to be an easy battle, and they fortified the whole area. Okay, so this is going to be extremely bloody, and it was a target that France must defend. Falkenhayn chose Verdun very carefully because of its historic significance, and it meant that France would sacrifice everything to hold Verdun. Okay, so he was like almost trying to lure them into a trap. He knew that they would have to defend Verdun, so that's a good place to try and bleed them white. Now, to draw that out a little bit more, the symbolic importance of Verdun. So it's a historic fortress city, and Verdun was an ancient ring of forts deeply tied to French national identity, military pride, and it was also occupying a very strategic area. It was a gateway to Paris, and Paris obviously being the capital of France. So therefore it was a non-negotiable defence. Losing Verdun would have shattered French public morale. It would have meant a political retreat, and surrender here was impossible. The French needed to stand and fight, and Falkenhayn knew that they would stand and fight. Okay, so he was luring them again into this kind of strategic trap, or so he thought. Then in Verdun itself was kind of French defencelessness and neglect of this area. So the fortifications had been stripped, so believing permanent forts were obsolete after Belgium's collapse, the French command had removed most of the heavy guns, so it was a weaker area anyway, which drew Falkenhayn's attention to it. There was weak trench lines, so General Joffre, the French military leader, ignored warnings about inadequate defence lines and undermanned garrisons around Verdun. So it looked to be kind of like a tasty prize for the German army. So Falkenhayn was thinking, this is definitely a place to attack. So with all that context in mind, let's look at a really good chronology now of the Battle of Verdun. So first off, you can see those 10-pound guns there, massive artillery pieces. So 21st of Feb 1916, the German artillery avalanche begins. So a Vorhut bombardment, which is a vanguard bombardment where you fire ahead of the main troops. Germany launched a massive 10-hour bombardment, firing over 1 million shells along an 8-mile front. Can you imagine 1 million shells? Absolutely, crazy bombardments. They targeted forts, so specialised German assault teams overran early French positions, and they captured Fort Douaumont, apologies for my pronunciation, on the 25th of February, which was a big deal in this battle. The French were extremely determined though, so General Philippe Pétain, a very famous kind of French military leader and into World War II actually for other reasons, took command, and he declared his famous vow, they shall not pass. Okay, that was a classic French rallying cry, and Pétain was to lead them through this kind of horrible battle of Verdun. Okay, then as it goes forward, so we have February to June 1916, and we have developed what was called the Sacred Way. Okay, and let's kind of just tease some of this stuff out. So a lifeline kind of logistical road was constructed. So with railway lines cut into Verdun, Pétain organised a 24/7 truck convoy along a single narrow road into Verdun. It was kind of like just a trickle of supplies to keep Verdun kind of alive effectively. But the logistics of this were massive. So the vehicles passed every 14 seconds, transporting 90,000 troops and 50,000 tons of supplies every week. Okay, so it became a kind of sustained defence, and it prevented that logistical operation, prevented French collapse, and ensured a continuous rotation of fresh troops coming in and out, because you couldn't stay in Verdun for too long, you'd go crazy. So troops had to be taken out of Verdun, and fresh troops had to be brought in to replace them. Okay, and it became that operation, it became known as the Verdun meat grinder. So you're kind of feeding troops into like a meat grinder. It's a horrible metaphor, but it captures the attritional nature of the Battle of Verdun. Crazy. There's a phosgene attack, chemical warfare basically. So Germany fires phosgene gas shells to reach Fleury, and they come within 2.5 miles of Verdun Cathedral, which is the kind of the sacred heart of the town, effectively. So chemical warfare starts to kind of kick in. This is all getting pretty grim, and to take pressure off Verdun, then the British launched the Battle of the Somme, which we have got an upcoming video on that. And the launch of the British Somme offensive on the 1st of July forced Erich von Falkenhayn, the German chief of staff, to redirect guns and troops away from Verdun. Okay, and in the image there, very famous image, you can see British soldiers going into action in the Battle of the Somme to effectively, strategically, to release pressure on the Verdun defenders, because then the Germans would have to move some of their troops away to deal with the Battle of the Somme offensive. Okay, so you can see it's getting pretty grim. To recapture key forts of Douaumont and Fort Vaux, so the Nivelle offensive kind of helps. Falkenhayn ends up getting sacked. The Kaiser Wilhelm II dismisses Erich von Falkenhayn for this failed Battle of Verdun, and replaces him with Field Marshal Hindenburg and General Ludendorff, and they almost kind of create this, almost effectively like a military dictatorship for Germany, with Hindenburg and Ludendorff having tremendous power to kind of run the war. And it's a grim reckoning. The 10-month Battle of Verdun concludes with over 700,000 total casualties, and also no strategic territory gained by Germany. So in some senses, if you're going to measure it by territory, it didn't do anything, but it did have certain strategic effects on France, which we'll tease out in a moment. Okay, so that gives you some of the key kind of events that were happening in this kind of very, very famous battle. Did really well there. And also, in terms of the national identity, Verdun became the ultimate symbol of French national endurance, sacrifice and military resolve. It showed that the French were fighters and they could go on and win this war. Okay, it was a real turning point in morally, I think, in that sense. So, and there you go. It became a national symbol of resistance. It strengthened French identity. So Verdun became the ultimate symbol of French national unity and endurance. They shall not pass. And they didn't. They held off the Germans. So it was a real prideful kind of moment of the war for the French. It triggered permanent fortress debates as well, and even into the present day, about historical debate over the value of fixed permanent fortifications. Is there a point to them or not? It's kind of quite interesting to know. You can argue either side there, but it did trigger a massive military reappraisal of fortifications. Then in terms of secondary significance, so getting slightly more important here, tactical evolution and strategic failures. So it was a logistical masterclass, we know that. So it proved that motorised transports along the Sacred Way could successfully supply a major front under continuous fire. It showed that it could be done. So it was nothing to be scared of later in the war. Also, Falkenhayn's failure. So Germany did fail to achieve, do you remember the target of 2-to-1 casualty ratios? That failed, and they actually ended up suffering over 330,000 casualties of their own in the German army, and they were very difficult to replace those troops. Falkenhayn is, as we know, he's sacked, and Hindenburg and Ludendorff rule for the majority of the rest of the war, and they run Germany a bit like a military dictatorship. I think it was the exhaustion of French manpower. There was severe attrition here, inflicted over 370,000 French casualties, severely draining the French army's strategic reserves. You can see they were really struggling. And then also, I think, in terms of a primary significant event, it brought the near collapse of the French army. After the Battle of Verdun, it drove the French army to the brink of total physical and psychological exhaustion, and it set them up eventually in 1917 for mutinies. The French army actually refused to fight in 1917 and said, "We've had enough. We've just had enough. We've been driven to absolute despair here." And in 1917, the French had to actually take some of their troops off the front line because they just refused to fight. And I think the terrible toll of Verdun kind of set the scene for those 1917 mutinies. Okay, so there you go. That is the meat grinder of Verdun. Okay, a very, very pivotal battle, with extremely high human cost, to put it mildly. So hopefully that has just started you off with your kind of historical research for this absolutely integral battle of World War One. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and tap the bell icon to never miss another Let's Learn video again. If you have any questions or any queries about the Battle of Verdun, just please do pop it into the comments, and I'll always do my best to kind of reply. And it just remains to say, obviously, thanks for listening, and take care. We'll see you soon.